Morning begins at Strawberry Mansion High School with a prayer.
We must save the children. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Linda Wayman was the fourth principal for Mansion in the same number of years. She had made sure that security cameras were fixtures all over the school.
94 cameras, yes. And we need more. So we always have to outthink them because they're trying to outthink us.
Mansion sits in a neighborhood where 40% of the people live in poverty. The highest number of homicides, rapes, and assaults in the city.
I think there ain't nothing gonna change about the school or this neighborhood.
You scared?
Yeah, because I'm little.
Little like Razak. His pride, the junior military uniform he carefully lays out on the chair.
Hello, request mission what? Today, standing by. So you're not at attention. Because you know to stand by is to not be at attention, right?
All of the footage that you just seen was 100% accurate and real. It was all very true and a grim depiction of what the United States school system looks like today. Or was it? Was anything that I just said real? Was any of it true? Or is everything that I'm saying right now just a lie? Well, being that you are my audience and I have full control over the narrative, over the visuals, and over the story that I'm about to tell, you don't really know whether or not I'm telling the truth or not. The only person that really knows that is me. And through this medium and many others, people like me who want to spin a narrative, who want to tell a tale, are able to manipulate their audience into believing virtually anything they want. A good propagandist will never get caught. Hi, my name is Aaron, this is my show Re-Education, and today we're going to be talking about propaganda. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So the very first clip that I showed in this video was actually real. It was all footage from different sources in the United States, but all of those clips were unrelated to one another. Of course, there was the clips of the Mansion High School itself, which is a very dangerous school with a lot of security, but there are also other clips that I edited in. Children saying the Pledge of Allegiance, military soldiers marching, a drill sergeant yelling at some younger students, and the ominous music that I played under all of it. Oh, and not to mention that I desaturated the colors and made everything a little bit more blurry and hard to see. All of these different tactics are things that are used on a daily basis by video editors and by propagandists who want to sell you ideas. And it doesn't just need to be in news stories. More frequently, we see it in advertisements, political campaigns, or even blockbuster movies. All of these different mediums use different forms of propaganda to force the viewer to believe things that they would otherwise not have enough evidence to believe. And today we're going to talk a little bit about that. So first of all, we're going to start with two clips from inside of two different schools inside of China. And then afterwards, we'll break down both videos and see what was done to give the audience the feelings that it did. Roll the clip.
On one of our last days in Xinjiang, we passed an elementary school full of Uyghur children. Before anyone could stop us, we caught a fleeting glimpse of how the Chinese government wants them to think. But it was just a fleeting glimpse.
And the spirit of that sharing is best seen here.
身体意识现在开始。
It's hard to figure out who is from Myanmar and who is from China, but here is how. Students from Myanmar wear green and white. Local students are from the Dai community and usually wear their ethnic costumes. Regardless of where they are from and what they are wearing, everyone plays happily together and dances to the same beat.
So as you can see, we have two different schools, both within China, both with very different feelings behind them. One of them was shot behind a fence with a hidden camera, very shakily, with very low resolution, and a lot of ominous sounds and chanting in the background. Of course, then also splicing to different shots of bars, cages, fences, and police officers, giving a fully ominous, fully uneasy feeling to the audience, whereas the other video clip showed an almost identical school with a very different framing. The children were all in frame. You could see their happy, smiling faces. Nothing was shaky, everything was stationed, and it was all bright, colorful, and shot in a way that gives you a friendly, happy, joyful reaction. And this is, of course, deliberate. One of these films was made with the sole purpose of giving a negative impression of China, whereas the other one was filmed with the sole purpose of giving a positive impression of China. Both of these films are propaganda, and I'll show you exactly how this is done with this video clip here. Propaganda has been used all throughout history, but really gained prominence during the early 20th century through the work of Edward Bernays, basically the godfather of propaganda, also nephew to Sigmund Freud. And in fact, Edward Bernays used a lot of Sigmund Freud's ideas to essentially come up with a model on how certain groups or individuals can control other groups of individuals, essentially by manipulating them and convincing them to do things based around their propaganda. And of course, you can see famous propagandistic works such as Uncle Sam back in the early 20th century trying to promote essentially joining the war, World War I. And you can see it moving all the way up into Soviet propaganda and anti-Soviet propaganda throughout the Cold War. And of course, that comes all the way up until today, where we've had various different forms of propaganda all through print media, through radio, through television, and now through the internet. And every different iteration of this has had similar yet distinctly different ways of disseminating that information and that propaganda to its audience. So now we're going to take a look at a variety of different techniques used to propagandize, and we're going to start with one of the most prevalent ones today, and essentially throughout all of history, and that is stereotypes.
The Japanese are not easy to know. I've lived among them for 10 years, and I can testify that they are as different from ourselves as any people on this planet. The real difference is in their minds. You cannot measure Japanese sense of logic by any Western yardstick. Their weapons are modern, their thinking 2,000 years out of date.
Stereotypes, when used in propaganda, essentially works to create an us versus them mentality, we are always the just, good, pure, perfect individuals who do the best work and who wear the most amazing clothes and have the best coiffed hair. And the other side is dirty, disgusting, terrible, stinky, unintelligent, criminals, despicable, etc., etc., etc. Essentially creating a demonized group that you can look down upon and scold and scoff at, while maintaining yourselves and your group as being superior in many different ways.
He went on, I would rather see my little girls die now, still believing in God, than have them grow up under communism and one day die no longer believing in God.
Americans are asking, why do they hate us? They hate what they see right here in this chamber, a democratically elected government. Their leaders are self-appointed. They hate our freedoms, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other.
The kinds of kids that are called super predators, no conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And the president.
We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets.
Nearly 180,000 illegal immigrants with criminal records ordered deported from our country are tonight roaming free to threaten peaceful citizens.
And this form of propaganda is very effective. It plays upon a lot of the basic instincts that we have as human beings. It works to encourage our natural tribe-like behavior because as a social group, we want to work within our group to make sure that we thrive and flourish and that sort of thing. But often we can be manipulated to believe that the out group is something that's damaging to us and could attack us at any time and destroy all of the good things that we've created. And it also works very effectively as a tool to manipulate, because when a group of people are united, they're usually stronger than the ruling class or the people that are at the top trying to manipulate them. So as long as the people in control are able to divide and conquer, then that form of propaganda is going to be very useful. Making sure that people hate each other, creating one group and another group and having them fight one another, like Republicans versus Democrats, black people versus white people, the coast versus the interior of the continent. All of these different forms of division are ways that people in control, people in power, are able to take individuals who would usually have more things in common than not and get them to fight one another while they essentially rob us. In fact, the online left creates a ton of perfect examples of this, like the dirtbag left versus the woke schools, the SJWs versus the debate bros. You'll notice the language often changes, but the mentality essentially stays the same. The in-group, the group that is defending their cause, is the virtuous one. And the out-group, the one that they're attacking or dismissing, however they like to put it, are full of degenerates and terrible, horrible people who will eat babies and other messed up stuff. And you'll notice that all of these different forms of in-group, out-group mentality and behavior almost exclusively works to the benefit of the ruling class. And of course, using stereotypes is not just something that's been used online. It was something that was very prominent all throughout history, notably with the Red Scare during the Cold War, where essentially the exact same talking points were being mirrored. You would hear Americans calling communists this red menace and saying that they were going to just destroy our freedom and take away our liberty. I have to admit, some of the anti-Soviet propaganda the Americans were pushing usually had to do with the Soviets being a fire or a evil hand or a demon. Wasn't really exactly specific. Whereas Soviet propaganda depicting American life usually had to do with how capitalism was destructive, or how the police had affiliations with the Ku Klux Klan, or how slavery was bad. You know, I actually think that the Soviets may have been a little closer to the truth on this. Okay, but I could go on forever talking about this specific type of propaganda, but we have so much other things to get through, so let's jump into the next one, which is glittering generalities and virtuous language.
It's not whether you get knocked down in life, it's whether you get back up.
I'm not running for some Americans, but for all Americans. We Democrats are in the future business, but they are the party of the past.
You have the right to be heard and believed.
You don't get to pick the issues you work on when you're president.
Do the best you can and make the most out of every single day. It's beautiful.
So glittering generalities and virtuous language usually is referred to as virtue signaling nowadays. But essentially what it is using platitudes or certain types of words and phrases to evoke an emotional response without really saying anything. Some notable examples were hope and change with Obama, or a future we can believe in with Bernie Sanders, or make America great again with Donald Trump. And Joe Biden's hope over fear and facts over reality, or you know, the thing, whatever the fuck Joe Biden's thing was. And a lot of these glittering generalities usually work with the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is a transfer. Essentially, where we use a symbol or an idea or a concept to evoke an emotional response out of somebody as well. And usually these symbols carry a certain amount of intrinsic respect or authority or prestige, like the American flag or a cross or a medical symbol. When used with glittering generalities, it invokes within the viewer a certain amount of prestige or importance to that concept. It naturally, through the use of common symbols, evokes to a person that this thing is official, or credited, or important, or righteous in some way, and it makes you feel as though you need to believe it. Of course, you see this in political ad campaigns when there's an American flag waving in the background, but you also see it more subtly when you're just watching regular TV. Say a pharmaceutical commercial comes up and somebody in a white lab coat is telling you about something. That lab coat, in and of itself, is a transfer. It is essentially a symbol that evokes an emotional response out of you to think that this person is an authority, even though they might just be a completely paid actor. But you don't really know that. But even if you do know that, your brain doesn't. Your brain thinks that it's something important. Even a prefix in a name like doctor or professor is seen as being inherently something official and something that should be listened to. Even though that doctor might have a doctorate in underwater basket weaving, even though they're talking to you about the medical efficiency and usefulness of masks during a COVID-19 pandemic. Obvious bullshit, let's move on to testimonials. Testimonials are essentially when a person of importance tells you about a thing and sings its praises and talks about all of its usefulness. And usually that person could be, say, a celebrity or a politician or somebody that you would intrinsically trust. You know, like Bill Cosby selling Jell-O pudding pops. Okay, that's a really bad example nowadays. More traditional examples of this, of course, would be Michael Jordan talking about how awesome Hanes underwear are. Moving on to the next one, which is plain folks. Plain folks is an old way of convincing a crowd that you, the propagandist, are just one of them. You're just a regular guy, a plain folk, if you will, and you just want to tell them about how this certain product or certain thing is just going to help them out in their lives.
So cheers. Thanks so much for being here.
Your beer, my root beer.
Leader Pelosi, thank you so much for joining me in the pub. Have you spent much time in British pubs before?
I've been in some British pubs in Britain.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one final member of the Republican Party.
Even the party has gone beyond Darth Vader.
Darth Vader?
Yeah.
I thought it was Dick Cheney.
The speaker essentially presents themselves as an average Joe, just one of the boys, somebody that you can have a beer with. A classic example of this would obviously be George Bush. But most politicians pull this shit off all of the time. And they even usually evoke a plain folks story when they're talking about things on the campaign trail. Hillary Clinton, and really actually no, every single politician does this when they talk about Susie or Bobby or Jim or Jeff or Mickey, Vinny, or Tony, whoever they're talking about, how they had this specific heartwarming anecdotal story that perfectly encapsulates how this politician is trying to do whatever the fuck they're trying to do. All of those stories are essentially plain folks stories. They are a way to manipulate the crowd into believing that the politician that they're talking to is a regular person. Uncle Joe, Scranton Joe, that's how he's portrayed. That's how the President of the United States has been portrayed the whole time, is that he's just a regular guy. Sure, he has gaffes once in a while, but he's like your old uncle, you know? Sometimes he gets things wrong, but he has the best of intentions. And even Donald Trump tried to use this exact same tactic when a lot of people were saying, yeah, he's a billionaire, and yeah, he's one of the elitist 1%. But have you heard how he talks? He talks like a regular person. He talks like a regular guy. He sounds like someone you'd talk to at the bar, which I'm not entirely sure is the best kind of person to have running an entire country that has the world's largest military, but I digress.
You've been a Trump supporter, actually, pretty much from the get-go, right?
Pretty good while, yeah, since at the end of last summer.
And what is it that you saw in him that you thought could actually get him as far as he's gotten?
Well, first off, he was a real guy. Like, when you talk to him just privately and you're sitting there talking, unlike a lot of politicians that are kind of stiff and rigid and wondering if everything they say, or should they talk to this person, should they not, I didn't get that at all with him. He was just a regular guy.
This is Aaron from the future, and I realize now that this video is getting very long, so I'm just going to rapid fire go through a few of the last forms of propaganda that are usually used, and that is bandwagoning, where essentially people will use different slogans like "Don't miss out," "Be the first," "Act now," "Supplies are running out," "Join the crowd," to make people feel as though they're going to miss out and not be part of the larger group if they don't act now and do whatever the propagandist wants them to do. The next one is deification, essentially using religion or religiosity or godly images to invoke in you a sense of immorality or morality based around the message that's being proposed. Religious fundamentalist groups use these tactics all the time, as well as Republican politicians often invoke God, religion, or our values as a way to make you believe that they are closer to God and therefore closer to the truth than the people that they oppose. Name-calling also works as a quick shorthand to make the opponent look as though they are untrustworthy or violent in some way, and many names could be used, such as genocide denier, fascist, conspiracy theorist, or, in the case of the left, anarchist, communist, radical, or even criminal. Degenerate also gets thrown around quite a bit when we're talking about issues of race, gender, sex, or sometimes even class. Card stacking, or stacking the deck, is essentially when you only say the good things about a product or an idea, omitting or lying about all of the bad things. Coattailing is when you use some other person or some other thing as basically the vehicle to push your campaign or your idea. A good example of this is essentially the Joe Biden campaign riding the coattails of Barack Obama. And last but not least is outrage marketing, something that I've talked extensively about, and you can find links to all of those videos in the description box below. Whew. Okay, so many different forms of propaganda. I assure you, this is one of the most complicated subjects that I've ever tried to cover, and honestly, I've barely even scratched the surface. There is so much more underneath that we could talk about. I've gone on for probably an hour now, and I could probably go on for several more hours talking about the different nuance and different ways in which these things are integrated and propagated and forced upon a population that otherwise doesn't even realize that it's happening. But we have to end it somewhere, so we're going to end it here. So thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate you coming on this journey with me. If you do enjoy the things that I do, please check out all the links in the description box below. Hit the little bell button so they let you know when I release a video. And thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.